Well, good morning or afternoon rather. Now we'd like to start, just 3 minutes late. If you still haven't taken a seat, please do so. Welcome to our ISH stage. Now it's my pleasure to hand over to Andreas Lücke. He's Senior Expert at the BDH, the German Association of the Heating Industry. And he has an interesting topic for us, REPowerEU and the Green Deal. So we are all looking forward to it, and he will present the panelists himself. And as always, if you have a question, you are always welcome to ask it right in between. Andreas, I will help you. I will be available with my microphone, or you can ask your question at the end. So just raise your hand, and if you need translation into English.
This next panel will be in German. You can use our headphones over there. So,
right, Andreas. You're all set, have a glass of water, and let's get this show on the road. Thanks for this charming introduction. Senior expert sounds great, doesn't it? Also very committed to the work of the EHI, the European Heating Industry, and we just had this topic about Europe with Mr. Moser, and so we would like to continue in this vein. At the EHI, I'm responsible for Market International, Research International. I also work in a strategy group and also in the Executive Council as an advisor. So today we have a very topical issue. It's called REPower and Green Deal. That's what the heading is for our panel. But yesterday the European Parliament adopted or made a decision telling people that 35 million objects, the worst ones, the worst first, to upgrade them to level E. Well, the individual countries will have to look at that, the member states and the council will have to look at that. But you can be sure this will have a consequence. People will not have realized really what is in store for them, what's coming their way. But on the other hand, obviously the energy sector needs to make a contribution. It's one of the largest emitters of CO2 in Europe. So I'd like to start by giving a little presentation, an impulse presentation on this topic. Well, after the attack on Ukraine by Russia, we quickly had a discussion in the European Union about the question, how do we get away from our dependency on Russian gas? Well, and we imported 40% of natural gas from Russia. That's the European Union. In Germany, it was 55%. This was an incredible level of dependency, and not many people thought about that. And REPower, covers a huge range. It also includes the Americans, and they had some vested interests. For example, it says LNG not from Russia, but from the United States as a substitute for Russian natural gas, build the necessary terminals, and all this has already happened at a speed I find breathtaking, breakneck speed. And so the export dependency was dramatically reduced. In Germany, it's almost zero now. And then the second element, which is of paramount importance for the heating industry in Europe, is, in addition, 30 million heat pumps need to be installed. If you are familiar with European matters and the European market, you might know that 105 million heating systems are installed in Europe. 80% of them are using gas. Oil-fired heating systems also play an important role in some countries. Installed heat pumps so far 4 million, but by 2030 another 30 million heat pumps. And for us that is a major challenge, a huge challenge. And, you know, the companies here on the trade fair, the market leaders, but also the smaller and medium-sized ones, can do this from a technological point of view. But when it comes to capacity, this is really a major challenge. Just talk to people, and you will immediately realize that there is cause for concern, but they are also optimistic that they will make it. And that's the one thing. Then another topic is digitalization of the heat market, which would mean the connection, interconnection, supporting photovoltaics, the combination with photovoltaics, and so on. And, well, what I also have here is the Fit for 55 program. This is something that started before the war against Ukraine. Fit for 55 includes EPBD and some other elements. Minimum energy performance requirements for buildings were defined, and ZEPS, zero energy building is defined. This is should be the standard by 2050 and not 2045, but 2050. Again, an enormous challenge. And not just industry, but also the industry associations have to live up to that. For example, the EHI. And so I'm very happy that Mr. Moser is here today, and because he's responsible at the DG Energy for this. Now, I would like to ask the panelists to come on stage. First of all, Thomas Heim. Thomas, hello. Thomas Heim is the CEO of Viessmann, and he's going to tell us a little more about Viessmann. I'm very happy that Viessmann is very committed to the EHI and works a lot also in the Executive Council. So entrepreneurs and representatives of large organizations like Federica Sabati, our Secretary General, support us all. Thomas Heim, well, we thought maybe you could start by telling us a little more about this challenge, this enormous challenge, but the industry is capable of getting to grips with that, with technology and with new concepts. So, your first statement. Okay, now I'm on. Thank you, Andreas, also for you know, all the praise of myself as an entrepreneur. Well, when you look around, particularly in 12.0 and 12.1, well, it's really inspiring, you know, the attention we get as an industry. So by installers, but also by many other stakeholders like politicians. On Monday, for example, the Minister for Building and Housing, Frau Geiwitz, was there. Then the Minister, the Hessian Minister, Tarek Al-Wazir, Boris Wein, another minister from a federal state, was with us. And that's not by accident, because people understand that if we want to achieve our CO2 reduction goals, then the building sector needs to be at the heart of this energy transformation. And for that, we need the enabler. And the enabler, that's us, the producers, but above all, our installers, who are needed in order to attain these very ambitious goals. And, well, very ambitious goals, 10 million more, 10 million more heat pumps by 2027, another 20 by 2030. But when you look at the real world, you will soon find that over the last 1, 2, or 3 years, well, the building sector has never actually met the emission reduction targets. And so this is why we need to accelerate and why we need to push this transition. For that, we need to stand united of all four stakeholders, i.e. The producer, the manufacturers, then the craftspeople, the consumers, the customers. It's impossible to do this without consumers, and politics. When we look at the producers, well, Andreas, please stop me if I'm too low, because I'm starting to get into the flow. When I look at the producers and the manufacturers, well, the technologies that are necessary in order for the transition from fossil to renewables are all present, are all there. First of all, obviously, the heat pump using natural refrigerants, because if we really ramp up the production of these heat pumps next year, 500,000 units, then please let's use only green refrigerants in order to, not to harm the environment. Then another important issue are things like district heating. That obviously is not always in an inner city or in a city, an urban area. It's not always the heat pump that's the best solution. And again, we can see a drive in the direction of renewable energy sources. And all companies in our industry invest a lot of money. We are investing 1 billion. Uwe Glock, Bosch, and they also invest a lot. So I think I can speak for the whole industry. And then obviously we need the installers. People tell us, well, there are not enough installers, and yes, that's correct on the one hand, but I think we should massively invest into training, and part of the billion we are investing is in this area. And then if we can also raise the awareness of our industry, make it more attractive, then we will inspire more young people for our craft, and also maybe from other crafts where where there is not such a demand anymore. Third issue, the consumer. The heat transition can only be successful, can only succeed if people understand it, if people are on board. And this is why at the beginning of this technology cycle, where there is not a real economy of scale in the industry, it's very important that the public authorities make this plannable, so that there is a steady flow of products being installed, and that it also remains socially compatible. So that brings me to the fourth stakeholder, the politicians. Well, when you look at market development, Andreas, last year 1 million heat generators could be installed last year. So you could see how these subsidies became effective. And so 200,000, we had about 375,000 applications for subsidies, and 200,000 of those were for existing buildings. And that's what's crucial, because we need to convert the existing buildings mainly. And when we're talking about investment incentives, if that's cleared up, then a steady flow of subsidies, then I'm convinced that we can master this challenge. Thank you, Thomas. Here's a glass of water for you, especially for you. Thank you, Thomas. Obviously, you could say many more things on technology, for example. Connectivity, photovoltaics, then the consumer becomes the prosumer. And these are things that are very interesting also to us in the association. Well, we are here at the Technology Energy Forum of the SVHIH, of the BDH. So it's not by accident called the Technology and Energy Forum. This is because already 10 years ago we said the technology and the sources of energy we are using, they need to be seen together. They need to be taken together. So the electrification process, what will that mean for the grid? What's about the question molecules or electrons? And therefore it is with great pleasure that I welcome my friend Jorgo Chatzimarkakis. Jorgo, hello. He is from Greece, but also from Germany, and he speaks some kind of German. Hello, Jorgo. He's the Secretary General of Hydrogen Europe. Jorgo and myself, well, we've known each other for many years, And what I always liked is that when it comes to hydrogen, you are completely ideology-free. You never said blue hydrogen, no, and only green hydrogen is okay. So this categorization that's happening in many ministries in Brussels, but and elsewhere, also in the Commission, this is something he doesn't share. I would now also like to ask all the other speakers on stage. Maybe Jorgo, you can join Thomas on the other side. So the next would be Dr. Uta Weiß. She is the CEO of or the chairwoman of the SME Energy Association of SME Energy Businesses, but it's obviously voluntary work, and James.
For participating in our panel, so everybody is here who is important for the topic. Dr. Weiß wird natürlich.
Okay, Dr. Weiß obviously will also speak a little about liquid sources of energy. As the BDH and the EHI, we think all options need to be considered. You need to take out all the stops, not rule out any technologies or sources of energy. Jorgo, let's start with you. It's really a hectic discussion. Oh, here he is. Sorry, there he is. There he is. And you already have a glass of water. Great. Jorgo, well, it's been a pretty hectic discussion. And can you tell us a little about it? Now, what's happening with hydrogen? I get the impression that, well, they kind of are leaving the heat market. Okay, I'd like to go center stage like he did. Well, first of all, I have to say it's a time of turmoil, maybe, and that's because hydrogen entered the stage a little later than it should have been. 2020, we had the hydrogen strategy of the European Commission, but we would have wanted to see it earlier. It was triggered by COVID, and then obviously mainly by the attack on Ukraine. Why so late? And why just early enough? Well, we are living in the times of a major misunderstanding. As you just said, there is a number of ideologues, of people who follow an ideology, who confuse what's good with what's realistic. 80% of our world is based on molecules, only 20% on electrons. And because with climate change, we know that we absolutely need to do something. So it's easy to say, or it used to be easy to say, electrons can do everything. But that's not the case, because the electrons are just not there. So this efficiency debate, because I don't like this. I hate it, because it's completely wrong, utterly wrong. Because this is a solar panel and gives me 100 kilowatt hours. Then on Crete, it's 220. In Saudi Arabia, suddenly 350. A lot more efficient. So the problem is I cannot transport the electrons from Saudi Arabia to Germany, but molecules. And that's the big problem. And that's why they had this problem with hydrogen. And this is why they said, just a moment, we already split up the world. We already have distributed the pie, the electricity pie. And when I say electricity good, molecules bad. But now suddenly there are green molecules. And this is why there were all this problem. This is why we have these delegated legal acts, which are nothing but a green vest. And now we, as the only sector, have a green vest. All the others haven't got it. When I charge my Tesla with the dirty electricity produced by coal or whatever in Germany, where it's even better to drive a diesel car than a Tesla, then if I do that, I'm green, because I don't have to prove that. But the hydrogen people have to prove. Every hour they have to prove that their sources is renewable energy. I mean, that's crazy. It's bonkers, isn't it? And this had happened because of people who said, hydrogen, that's a danger, kill it off. So we try to maybe a little flexible. We have longer transition periods, but still not very good. So we are wearing this straitjacket, but it's obviously it's too tight. And as soon as this comes into effect, we will all ask all sectors to wear the same jacket and not just us. Okay, let's come to the heating market. Always, the heating market was the market, in addition to the automotive market, was where the real fight took place. So where people said, no hydrogen, just electrons, no molecules. Why? If I can have, I don't know, hydrogen from Australia, from Mauritania, from Saudi Arabia, whatever. And if that's efficient, why do I rule it out if it's climate neutral? Why do I start a situation where I don't have the electricity grid? I'm a European, obviously, at heart, but I also look at what's happening in Germany. Then Mr. Müller from the Federal Grid Agency tells us from January 2024 onwards there might be blackouts. So we might have to ration your electricity for your electric vehicles or your heat pump even. What does this mean? So there's a heat pump dictatorship, Mr. Reichen, and you have to install the heat pump. And from the same spectrum, they tell us, well, sorry, the grandma has to go without heating because we have to ration electricity. We have to fight that. We have to resist. Because that's the problem in Germany. We are like lambs to the slaughter. We always follow. So this needs to change. I have a lot of trust in Robert Habeck. He's good. He's doing good, and he makes sure that we do not just get molecules, but the electrons, but also hydrogen. But the problem is in his back, Mr. Greichen. Mr. Greichen, he's not from the Green Party. And he's a member of the Agora Energy Transition. And where do they get their money? Not from the federal coffers, but most of the money they get from the United States. Okay, in the discussion we will have to talk about where the money comes from and why this is a politics of vested interest. You can all read up on that. You can all find it. But we need to talk about it. And well, in the magazine Die Zeit, there will be an article who will show this, but it will not be on page 1, because then the editor says, well, okay, Agora, these are the good lobbyists. And it's not good or bad. It's fast decarbonization, it's reasonable carbonization, or stupid decarbonization. And that's what's happening. Stops us, it's stupid and is damaging to hydrogen, because hydrogen could accelerate this, and in our discussion we could discuss how we can accelerate it. And you can see, so we are in Europe, look at this, Germany is our most important market, and if it doesn't work in Germany, if it fails in Germany, then good night Europe, because then it will also affect the rest of Europe. All right, it might be a good advantage if a German has Greek roots, then at least it's not boring. So you are known for your temper, and thanks for that, very lively, really woke all of us up. Robert Habeck, as you know, traveled to Norway and looked at blue hydrogen. I remember the last but one discussion with you. It was that at that time it would have been a no-go for a minister to go to Norway to look at blue hydrogen. But there's still some resistance. Also, Ms. Geiwitz, who is very charming and a good speaker, but I'm afraid also a little against hydrogen. Now I would like to continue with a lady. And this is very important for Germany and also for Belgium and parts of France, where heating oil actually does play an important role, liquid fuels. We have 5.6 million oil-fired heating systems in Germany that are not really modern. Thousands of tons of oil are burnt every year. And so the question is, can we replace all of them by heat pumps, or wouldn't we have something different for, listed buildings and so on? What can we do in these areas? Now, Ms. Weiß can tell us more about that. There are approaches to get to grips with this, and maybe she can tell us more about it. Thank you. As you said, I'm as a voluntary position, is the chairwoman of the Association of the SME Energy Businesses in Germany, and especially one company is working here, and we are the ones who transport these fuels into Germany and to the homes, and therefore obviously we are confronted with the question of reducing CO2 emissions in this sector, and have kind of green heating oil, and you could already do a lot. And as the previous speaker said, there are a lot of bans, prohibitions, preventing things. And currently in fossil fuels, we are not allowed even to do regenerative fossil fuels, which is really nonsense. And on the wall over there, there is this green fuels ready label already on many devices, on many systems. So the industry of the manufacturers are also willing to join us, and we are both in EMTX and M2V, so we are really very active, and we try to change this at a political level so that these nonsensical bans are a thing of the past. So I would agree with you also with regard to the people who try to stop this. We are also very active in the transport sector. So it's the same pattern they are following. So we are willing to go in this direction. And we also have biofuels that could be used, that could be blended in HVO, for example. And as the company, Mabanach is the name of the company, what we do also with EM2X, maybe in Hamburg you had an opportunity to visit the small facility there, and also there's a representative here, and so there's a small Fischer-Tropsch system. This is a paraffin diesel, and could be used for cars, but also for heaters. So it's possible to use fossil fuels, biofuels, and create them also, synthetically. And it doesn't make any sense to ban a technology. Germany and the EU like to do that, unfortunately. If at all, you should phase out the fossil fuel and replace it with a climate neutral fuel, but the technology itself is not evil, and the next speaker probably will tell us with gas it's the same. It's a similar thing. So we as a company and as an association, and there are other companies represented here, we are willing and ready to do this, and we would ask politicians not to make any nonsensical bans that stop us from doing so, because customers need it.
So pleading to be more open for technology, that's something we're delighted about, because this is also part of the visions that we've developed for 2050. And Thomas is really strongly involved here, and Alex worked on this too. So it's important to us that we have this openness towards technology and that this is visible. But of course, as a moderator, we don't want to say too much, but there is something that I'd like to add. So in Europe, we have the situation that we also have Eurofuel, and that's something that you're committed to too. Moritz Bellingen, he's here somewhere, the Secretary General. Moritz, welcome. And Sandrine, welcome. We saw each other just now. So this pilot is something that's being carried out with all the prestigious manufacturers, and what we can see here is that these synthetic fuels can be used without technological problems, or do we need to develop technology further so that this works? So things are happening. We're not sitting on our hands. There's one other thing that I'd like to point out. So of course, there's so much potential here, and there's lots of dynamism, but we had an increase of 105% with heating oil. That's not necessarily a renaissance, that is a development when you buy in bulk. And yeah, there are different things that are possible here, different ways of evaluating this. But Ms. Weiß, thank you so much. And now to James.
Since quite a long time. And that's the reason why I could assume before I invited you that you understand most of what we are saying here. But it's not your intention to answer in German and give you the statement in German. If somebody has a problem to understand English, his English is, by the way, flawless. It's not Cockney, it's flawless, it's fantastic. So if you have a problem to understand it, we have the devices here. You can use them. The lady here is helping you if you need this device. Now, James, times for the gas people and the gas lobbyist is not the nicest one in the world. I remember 5 years ago, it was the other way around. It was fantastic and beautiful. Now we have some opposition, but on the other hand, we see also some very, very interesting developments in the gas sector, and that gives us the hope that this is not a dead topic, in the contrary. And what Jorgo said about molecules is absolutely clear. We need also molecules. It cannot be only electrons. But James, please go ahead. If you want to speak German, do it. But
ja, vielen Dank für die Einladung.
Thank you so much, but I think that would be a little bit strange if I spoke German. So I think it would be better if I speak English. That's easier for me to speak.
Indeed, it's not the easiest time in the gas sector, and I will speak slowly in English, and if I speak too fast, let me know. In principle, we are facing probably the biggest challenge we faced as a sector. Our biggest supplier was Russia, and the war in Ukraine means that Russian gas is no longer an acceptable energy that we can use in Europe. Eurogas fully supports the general reduction and eventual departure from trading with Russia by 2030, as stated by the European Commission. That means that at the moment what we've done and what Robert Habeck, who is actually very good, has been doing is going around the world making sure that we have other gas. You would never have imagined that a country like Germany, which has such sacred rules for public participation, such sacred rules for environmental impact assessments, could put something like the LNG Accelerator Act together and get it through a green government's parliament, because that act has basically done a huge thing. By the end of this year, Germany will be able to import around 44.5 billion cubic meters of LNG. Previously, it was getting about 50 billion cubic meters from Russia. So basically, through the work of the German government, there will be the possibility to replace the Russian gas with LNG that comes from all over the world, not just America or Qatar or other places. The biggest challenge that we really face at this macro level, and I will come down to talk about heating shortly, is that most of our partners around the world want long-term contracts, i.e. 20 years, 25 years, which is good for the consumer because the price will be much lower, but is at odds with a view of being carbon neutral by 2050. This is the problem that we are facing mainly in the gas sector today, how to secure supply for the long term. And that is what the European Commission is also working on, because we have to understand we need gas today. In the heating sector, gas is still king. Gas is still likely to be king for another 10, 15 years. This is a reality. So it's not always that difficult to be a gas lobbyist when you're talking about heating, because last year I think Germany put 200,000 heat pumps in and 600,000 boilers. So in reality, we are still outstripping boilers 3-to-1, and that is likely to stay the case for the rest of this decade. Now, to come to heating, talking about supply first, so everyone understands, gas will continue to be supplied. It will come from all over the world. It won't just be Russian gas anymore. That's clear. So there will be a supply of gas, and that answers the first question, can you expect gas still to be available for heating? The answer is definitely yes. However, we have to look at the future, and in Eurogas we are very consumed with the future. We believe that we have to meet net zero, and we would like the gas sector to do it before 2050. And so we look very much to people like Jorgo and Hydrogen Europe, but also to our partner Heim from the European Biogas Association, because we will need biomethane and we will need hydrogen to be introduced to the grids. Biomethane is the best in the short term because it is a one-for-one molecular exchange. It is still more expensive than natural gas today, even with the crisis that we're facing. So it's not an easy, cheap option just to put into people's homes. But biomethane requires no change to our distribution grids, requires no change to our boilers, and ultimately for the consumer it is an experience that they are used to and it's a technology they can use. Coming alongside that, of course, is hydrogen. And I do not understand why anybody would oppose any solution in heating. Heating is going to be one of the most difficult to decarbonize sectors. It's people's buildings. Most people don't change their heating on a whim. Nobody wants to spend 20,000 to insulate their home and put a new heating system in. We will need all of the options we have. In Eurogas, we believe that there will be electrification to a degree. We believe that there will still be boilers that will run increasingly on blends with biomethane and with hydrogen. And we will need all of the different heat pumps, not just the electric ones, but the ones that are gas, the ones that are hybrid, and the ones that are eventually hydrogen ready. If you look at somewhere like the UK, it's not going to surprise you that I said that. If you look at somewhere like the UK is running heating trials at this very moment. As we sit here in Frankfurt, they are looking at how hydrogen can be used in the home. This is good for us. It's good for you. It's good for me. It's good for all of us, actually, let's be clear. This means that the UK is taking very seriously a drive to getting its buildings down to net zero by 2050, but it also understands something that the Dutch and many others are coming to learn. You cannot electrify your way to to net zero by 2050. The Dutch thought they would, and they've reneged. They've said it's impossible. They now have a target of 20% of biomethane being blended into the grid by 2030 to decarbonize heating, and only for heating. It's a 2030 target for heating. This tells you, ladies and gentlemen, molecules will be part of the solution. They have to be. If we do not bring renewable and low-carbon molecules into the system for the future, then you can forget about net zero today. Thank you.
James, thanks a lot. I'm very happy that you focus on this interdependency between hydrogen, green hydrogen, maybe bridge technology, blue hydrogen, biomethane. Biomethane potential is currently higher, much higher. And the decarbonization of, let's say, the gaseous fuels. I think that's a very important thing. And the other thing is you see some tendencies, for example, in Germany, that some strategic guys, I would call it, in the ministries, think in terms of dismantling the grid, which, in my opinion, is short-sighted. We are talking about 550,000 kilometers of gas grid alone in Germany. It's incredible. It's totally insanity. It's wasteful. Yeah, and that's something. And yeah, you.
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's complete nonsense. It's an insane idea to rip up the distribution grid of gas. You will not decarbonize homes with electricity alone. We did a small study, and what I can say is insanity, about a year ago, which showed that when you get to a 30% penetration of electric-only heat pumps and a 30% penetration of electric vehicles in a substation level, so we're talking about 200 homes, any house beyond that that goes for a heat pump or electric vehicle, the lights go off in the last house on that substation. That is the reality. So it's a bit like you were saying, of course, about the Bundesnetzagentur. So Mr. Muller has already started forecasting that they'll have to have a sort of rolling system of you can use your heat pump now or your car then. This is not what consumers will accept. This will destroy the energy transition from a consumer point of view. We found that, in fact, if you actually go in two directions, i.e., you start using biomethane and or hydrogen, you can actually increase the amount of electric-only heat pumps you can put into a substation level, but you still need the gas grid to do that because you have to deliver the natural gas blended with biomethane or the biomethane blended with hydrogen in the future. So, in principle, you need the distribution grid to decarbonize homes. Without it, you will have to dig a lot of copper out of the ground in places like the Congo. Deep sea, the one I like at the moment is deep sea mining. Now that sounds like a lot of expense and a lot of trouble to me.
Andreas, wenn ich da mal draufsetzen dürfte.
I wanted to give it the word to you anyhow, but I would like to say one word before you start. The strategic guys in the ministries, they have also another idea, you know, excluding households, and then you don't need the grid anymore, and then establish pipelines purely for hydrogen. Jorgo, what is your philosophy here?
Ich mache in Deutsch weiter oder auf Englisch?
I continue in German. So basically what's happening here is a crime. You have to say it as it is, and that's no joking matter either. So 500,000 kilometers of assets. If we just stop them, even though we know that we don't have enough electricity grids, even though we know that the resources are not enough for this crazy idea of all electric to become a reality, then this is a crime to our own economy. That's just the way it is. As I said earlier, I'm going to be very clear now. Agora, energy transition, that is a place, and they have a specific interest. So not any American interests, they're the philanthropist interests. You can read up on it. So I have to explain this so that people can understand what we're doing here. So these are really rich Americans in California. They want to save taxes. So they come up with a think tank, and then they save taxes. Great, that's legitimate. And then this foundation has a purpose. So early in California, people realized electricity is green, is good. So following this path, these same philanthropists who want to save taxes invest in these technologies that are pushed up by the think tanks, and others are then talked down, and they can earn tons of money with this, as you can see with Tesla and their shares. One example, many others. So that's okay. So that was smart of them. But there's one thing that makes me absolutely furious, and that is that they say, we are good, you are bad. Because that is not true. We have lithium prices that are skyrocketing. Why? Because there's going to be such a run on this resource. Cobalt, everything you need for all electric. There's going to be a scarcity here. So hydrogen is one of the few things that are still available. For example, we talked about other ones as well. We talked about oxygen. We talked about many different things that where the price will probably be lower, but then we have to be very careful. So who do we have as representatives in the ministries? Are these people who are really speaking on behalf of the people, or are these people who have other masters? And I'm being very open here because it's important to be so direct. Thank you, Jorgo. Thank you for being so open. So of course it's clear that as an association, to answer your question, we are a little bit reticent, but there is information that we have too. Thomas, I have a technological question, because we also said that solutions for heating high-tech are important. And of course, we have a drastic development on the heat pump market. First of all, with the growth rates in Germany. So in Germany, we had some interesting figures. Now we're at 236,000. And in Europe, by the way, the situation is quite similar. So we had an explosion in France. So I'm also involved in market research, and we're at 1.4 million in terms of European sales, and compared to 6.5 million overall sales. That's one point. The other point is that we can say now that 70 to 75% existing stock, that used to be the opposite though. We had a very dominant technology where there was 78% which were only existent stock, and then 20% new. So of course air pressure is quite affordable compared to solar and water. Thomas, what do you think? Is there a risk that there will be complaints later on from those who have, for example, combined heat and power, and then all of a sudden everything is very cold and the heaters were necessary? And another question, what do you think about hybrid solutions? Hybrid solutions as are very prominent in Italy with 40,000, for example. So that was my technology question to you. Thank you so much, Andreas. So first of all, thank you so much for the choice of panelists, because you can see that there's so much commitment for topics that is wonderful. And I think it's fantastic that you could almost think that we are having a debate where we disagree or where we have to defend our point of view, but actually that's not what we're doing. What we need in our industry is that we stand united, and that this is something which covers all the different technologies, so that we can contribute to the goal that we all share, and that is that by 2045, Germany will be carbon neutral and globally 2050, and that is a goal that we can achieve together. So I think we can be quite proud and we can be quite positive. And apart from talking as much as we've talked, I also think it's important that we really become active. And that's what we're focusing on with Viessmann, but also with the IEE. And it's great. And there are so many of us who are walking in this direction. So your specific question with regard to heat pump technology and whether it's suitable for buildings, that's something that can be answered if you just go through the halls here of the ISH. We all know that in existing buildings, the run-up temperature is higher because often there isn't underfloor heating. There are radiators too. So you need to make sure that all the rooms are heated properly, and with cold biomethane that is not as easy. And that's why we see that all the different people working towards this direction. And if this is then combined with PV and with battery storage, and that's the same tendency as electrification, then you have a very comprehensive solution which is very good for the grid because it takes some of the strain off the grid. And as you said earlier, that means that buildings are not consuming but prosuming buildings. So from that point of view, we don't see that there's a risk of a too large number of heating elements being used. And we see that policymakers also have a responsibility, though. They have to strike a balance between supporting and promoting the electricity prices. So if this is skyrocketing, then of course there's not enough incentives for the companies, and we should not lure people into false beliefs and then have them be confronted with a situation that is not to what they expected. So the "and" is always important for me, having a big "and" between the different participants. So there were so many different studies, for example, by the Fraunhofer Institute, very interesting, so they checked to see what is the easiest way when it comes to buildings to decarbonize them. And then the answer is, of course, heat pumps are key, but you need different technology too. And it's great that all this exists. It would be so sad if that did not exist, but these things do exist. So I think that they really do have everything so that we can have this change. Thank you so much. So first of all, Thomas, walking along the halls here, and I really agree with you, it's obvious that we aren't a boiler industry, we are a system industry. So we have very complex systems. As you said, the consumer becomes a prosumer, so producing electricity in a direction so that at some point it can be sold. And yeah, that there's not only the own consumption, and actually the prices are pretty good here, but hopefully at a European level with the producers and the module, that there won't just be agent value creation. So this is something that becomes quite obvious when walking through these halls. With the heat pump, for example, this can be supported with PV, with intelligent management, and then e-mobility too, with the wall walks. That's something that you can see here too. So Uwe, I saw that too with Bosch, but also with Viessmann, with Weiland. So you can be inspired there. This is not a boiler industry. This is a systematic industry. Ms. Weiß, a question about the political reaction to the efforts. And another question. What about the big difficulties, about the sort of the big guys like Shell and Exxon? Are they committed enough? And are we really getting through to the Commission with this topic, with the government? Maybe you won't be able to comment that much on that topic, but still, what is the situation? Well, for the big corporations, it's actually EN2X that can speak better than us, because we're basically just a medium-sized company, family-run. And we're a lot closer to the final customer in our line of work. But we can also see when working in the Federation and EN2X is basically the uniting aspect here. And Moritz Belling, who is in charge of heat there, is present too today. So it's wonderful that he's here. And yes, we do take a stand, of course. And as companies, we do have many conversations with policymakers, but we also realize that the Ministry of Economic Affairs is not really very open to some topics for some reason. And the Ministry for the Environment, there's a lot of ideology here. When it comes to transport, it's the same thing. The same thing with heat, with electrification. Yesterday at a panel debate, I had the Eco Institute at my side, and then when I said towards the end, as long as electricity isn't 100% green when it comes to e-mobility, but also when it comes to heat pumps, there's no point continuing to talk, because basically we're doing them a favor if we have molecules from other countries where electricity is available for reasonable prices, and then that is converted, and then potentially it's different types of molecules that are used here, and then that is something that we can bring into the country for decarbonization. So when it comes to Germany, it is really difficult, because there are so many people who have very ideological backgrounds, especially in the ministries. But fortunately, there are some people who have common sense. But in Brussels, the Commission, there is some hope that maybe one day they'll all wake up. I mean, you represented there more, or James, in Brussels. It's so difficult, though. But now it's becoming quite obvious. You just have to open the German tabloid Bild-Zeitung. When it comes to heatings, the consumers are making their voices heard more. So perhaps this is a direction where there will be more input coming in the future. And politically, this will help us to avert these extreme bans. He wants to say something. I wanted to talk about the prosumers. So first of all, I agree that the people are the ones who have to make their voices heard. And I think that that is going to happen. Then the heating market, Mr. Habeck or his friend Mr. Greichen, they've overdone it. I mean, you can turn a screw, but at some point the screw breaks, and this is what's happened. So there's going to be opposition, and this opposition is necessary. Prosumer, I love that word. Do you know golden hydrogen? Ever heard of that? Golden hydrogen? Can you give me a bottle, please? So that's something you can produce on your roofs. You have photovoltaics on your roof. It's a Belgian company, and then behind that you have a big box, and water from the air, and there's always water in the air, is turned into hydrogen in this box automatically, and then you don't need a battery. So we can install that in your home, and as from 2026 this is going to be available commercially, so you've got to wait a couple of years, but still you can have it delivered already, so you can have a test run. So you produce your hydrogen with this, then you can generate electricity whenever you want. You can heat with this, but you can't charge your car. So this morning with my hydrogen car, of course, I drove here, and I've driven 68,000 kilometers with this in the last couple of years. So that works, but I don't have all the energy I need at home. But with golden hydrogen, you just turn this debate upside down, especially when it comes to the municipal grids being stopped. That's such a load of rubbish. We can get rid of all of this if finally we have an open debate, open towards technology. And there are so many different colors when it comes to hydrogen. So there's and. I agree with that. We can only do this together. I don't say that batteries are stupid. I just say the battery is going to be bloody expensive. And if you have two infrastructures when it comes to automotive, when it comes to heatings, then you don't have as many costs as compared to if you only have one infrastructure. The reason is really simple. So the guys from the Eco Institute need to know what they're talking about. The costs going up exponentially. So hydrogen molecules linear. That is the big difference. If you combine both of these things, you have lower overall costs. And if they don't wake up in Berlin and some other governments, then these costs will just go up for the economy. I'm just going to repeat that. And then the Bild-Zeitung, the tabloids, is going to be one gate that's going to let hell loose, but others will too. And hopefully it won't be too late, because the course is being set in Brussels at the moment too. We are fighting together, James and I. We also think about renewables too, but sometimes people overstep the mark. Things aren't completely lost yet. We're still in this process. Well, that my dear Jorgo, that's almost like a closing statement, but you just mentioned a new technology, golden hydrogen. So basically, that's what it boils down to. New ideas keep turning up. So if we just let industry get on with things, and if science can do research instead of all of these bans, instead of all these planning mechanisms. Another topic, for example, that we can see here too, the bidirectional charging of e-cars, because basically that means that you have these huge batteries for cars, and they can also be used to supply the house, but also the heat pump, which might be able to do air conditioning in summer too. So that's a great idea, instead of having stationary batteries, which cost 5,000 to 12,000 euros. So there's a lot of scope in this. So de-electrification, for example, we have some German, Austrian producers which are fantastic. So thank you, James. Thank you so much for being so patient with your colleagues who speak German. But the way you understand German is wonderful, and he can speak German really well too. So thank you so much. And Thomas, you too, and Jorgo. And I'd like to say I'd like to comment on what you said too. We need more cooperation. EHI is ready here. Eurofuel, so he's there, Moritz, Eurogas, and Hydrogen Europe. So the biomass people who are on board here. There's something else I'd like to mention. Wood, also important for energy. That's carbon neutral. We didn't talk about that today. It's not necessary to do so either, but it plays a role for us too. Just something I'd like to add. The smart heat pump can also provide air conditioning already. Yes, of course. So thank you so much to the participants. James, thank you so much for traveling here from so far away, and I hope you'll have the opportunity to take a look around. It's really worth it. It's a great trade fair. So thank you so much for your attention. Are there any questions, or have all the questions been answered? So I'm happy to help you. We have enough time for questions. Maybe you can introduce yourself and then ask your question. So hello. Something that I've found lacking in terms of this debate, the energy that is needed for all these processes. I mean, you need so much energy to create hydrogen or diesel. To create that at the moment, you need so much energy. So there are these debates. Where does this energy come from? So all the cars, if they are electric, if they were electric, would have twice as much energy in the world. I think that the way this is explained is short-sighted, and it would be great if we could have a more balanced approach to this topic. And to think outside the box a bit too. I mean, hydrogen, yes, we need that. Or, for example, for ship transport or trucks. I mean, ships, yes, trucks, no, basically. And I feel that there aren't enough lines of argumentation. Yeah, you'll hear more about that in a minute. So, what do you know about diesel and its effect? Roughly 27%. So, what's the effect of a fuel cell in the car? 60%. Battery, 80%. And now, the biggest thing, the sun, photosynthesis. What's the efficiency? Well, I think it's actually quite a good idea to not necessarily think about that now. 2.3%. So, ladies and gentlemen, the important point is this discussion about efficiency. That is something that we need to deal with in a different way. So 2% of providers.
So system means that you don't just think, what about this solar panel here? Now, I'm already filling my car with something that's coming from very far away, and the same will happen in the future. So, in the hottest part of Australia would be sufficient to supply all electricity to the whole of the world every day. It's just the question, how do we organize it? It's not all these guys at the Eco Institute and so on. I already joined an ecological party in '86. I know all this, and I hate it because it's not honest. Because this question I just asked is not asked. So let's be honest, let's be open in our discussion. I know the argument, oh yes, and whenever I get all the bots, it's always the same arguments. It's boring. So I just want to say, let's be honest. Then we can discuss this frankly, and then everything's okay. So looking at the time, I would leave it at that, and I would like to thank you all again. And Ilka, I'll hand over to you now. Thank you so much, Andreas. And now that you all are here, and obviously you are very welcome to talk to each of the panelists face to face. You would be welcome to do that if you have another question, because we are a little behind schedule already, and would continue with our next item on the agenda. And a big hand for everyone again. Thank you.